Welcome to our analysis. Today we're looking at a subject that really it goes beyond just being a band.
Oh, absolutely. It's more of a cultural institution.
A cultural institution, a huge corporate enterprise, and at its heart, an artistic phenomenon that has somehow stayed relevant for more than 50 years. We are, of course, talking about Queen.
And when you look at the raw data, the numbers themselves are just on another level.
They're staggering. I mean, you see estimates for record sales that fly anywhere between 250 million and 300 million units.
And that firmly places them in the top tier of the world's best-selling music artists of all time. It's a very exclusive club.
And beyond the sales, there's the sheer ubiquity of it. You can't watch a major sporting event, you can't walk into a stadium, really anywhere on the planet without hearing their music.
It's embedded in the culture now. The accolades track right along with that success. You have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2001.
Which is standard for a band of their stature.
True. But what's less standard is the Songwriters Hall of Fame induction in 2003. And what's significant there is that all 4 original members were inducted.
That's a key point. That's a statistical rarity.
It is. In most bands, you have 1 or 2 principal songwriters. Here, you had 4 individuals, all capable of writing a hit song, all contributing to the catalog.
And that dynamic, that sort of four-way partnership, is something we really need to get into because it defines how this whole machine actually worked.
It was democracy, often a very volatile one, but a democracy nonetheless.
Before we dig into the history, though, we should probably set the stage with where things are right now.
Right.
We're recording this in early 2026. And the business of Queen, it's never been bigger.
It's arguably at its peak in terms of asset value. If you just look at the last couple of years, the financial milestones are enormous.
You're talking about the catalog sale.
Exactly. In 2024, Sony Music acquired the band's catalog for a figure reported to be around 1.27 billion US dollars.
Which is about 1 billion pounds sterling.
Yeah.
A staggering number.
One of the largest single artist acquisitions in music history. Now, that deal covers publishing and recorded music rights for most of the world.
But not North America, right?
Correct. Disney still holds the North American recorded music rights, so the total value of the catalog is actually even higher.
And then, just to compound that commercial validation, they received a major artistic award in 2025.
They did. The Polar Music Prize, which is often called the Nobel Prize of Music within the industry. So you have this twin peak of immense financial value and ultimate artistic recognition happening right now.
It's just a world away from where this all started, and that's our mission here today. We want to trace that line, that trajectory.
How did it get from there to here?
Exactly. How did a group of, college students in London become a billion-pound asset? We need to really dissect the 4 personalities that made it all work.
And to do that, you have to start before the band was even called Queen. You have to go back to the foundations, to the period between 1968 and 1971.
Right, to a band called Smile.
The proto-Queen, as it's sometimes called.
And Smile was formed by 2 key people, one of whom is just fundamental to the entire Queen sound, Brian May.
And you can't understand Brian May's contribution without understanding his background. He wasn't your typical art school rock and roller.
Not at all. He was at Imperial College London studying physics and infrared astronomy.
He was literally a doctoral candidate, an academic. And that precision, that scientific mindset, you can hear it in how he approached his instrument.
Which brings us to the guitar itself, the Red Special. This is a story that's become legendary among guitar players.
It's essential to their sonic identity. This was not a Fender or a Gibson he bought in a shop. This was the guitar he built from scratch with his father back in 1963.
And the materials, that's what's so fascinating.
They're part of the mythology. They hand-carved the neck from an old mahogany fireplace mantle.
From the 18th century, so the wood itself was hundreds of years old.
Think of the density, the resonance of that aged wood. The body was oak and blockboard. The whole thing was an engineering project just as much as it was a musical one.
He designed it to feed back in a very specific way, didn't he? To be controllable.
Precisely. It allowed him to create these long, sustained, almost violin-like notes. It gave him a sonic signature that no one else could replicate because no one else had that specific, unique object.
So you have this physicist with a homemade super guitar, and who joins him in Smile?
Roger Taylor. He was a dental student at the time, and he answered an ad May had put up on a college notice board.
What did the ad say?
It was looking for a Mitchell Ginger Baker type drummer. So a powerful, dynamic player. Taylor fit the bill perfectly.
So you've got the guitar and the drums, the engine room is there, but they're missing the crucial front-of-house element.
They were. Smile had a bassist and lead singer named Tim Staffel. and they had some success, a bit of a following on the college circuit. But in 1970, Staffel decided to quit.
Why was that?
He felt the band wasn't going anywhere, really. He was more interested in soul and R&B, and Smile was very much a hard rock band. His departure, though, created the opening.
For a fan of the band who had been waiting in the wings.
A very enthusiastic fan. A young man named Farrokh Bulsara.
Better known to the world as Freddie Mercury.
But at this point, he's an art student. He was born in Zanzibar, of Parsi descent. He'd moved to England and was studying graphic art and design at Ealing Art College.
And he knew the band socially.
He did. He was friends with Tim Staffel. So he'd been watching Smile from the sidelines, constantly giving them advice, telling them they needed to be more theatrical to improve their stage presence. He was essentially acting as a creative consultant before he was ever a member.
So when Staffel leaves in 1970, Freddie sees his chance.
He steps right in. And almost immediately he starts to shape the band's identity. He was the one who came up with the name Queen.
Which the others weren't sold on at first, right?
They were very hesitant. They were worried about the connotations, especially in the early 70s. But Freddie was insistent. He said it was strong, universal, regal.
He also changed his own name around this time. Bulsara becomes Mercury.
Yes. That was inspired by a line in a song he'd written called My Fairy King. The lyric is, Mother Mercury, look what they've done to me. He felt it was a powerful name.
And he put his art school background to use with the logo, the Queen crest.
Which is a brilliant piece of branding, even now. When you look closely, it's not just a random design, it's a heraldic coat of arms for the band using their zodiac signs.
I never knew that. So what's in there?
You have 2 lions for Leo, representing John Deacon and Roger Taylor. There's a crab for Cancer, which is Brian May. And 2 fairies for Virgo, which was Freddie.
And a phoenix over the top.
A phoenix to symbolize rebirth and immortality. He was building this grand, regal brand identity right from the very beginning.
But they still had one piece missing. They needed a permanent bassist.
And finding the right one proved difficult. They went through 3 different players in about a year. Mike Gross, Barry Mitchell, Doug Bogie. None of them quite fit the chemistry.
It wasn't just about the playing.
It was about the personality mix. It wasn't until February 1971 that they finally found their 4th corner, John Deacon.
The quiet one. Deacon is often the member people know the least about, but he was so important to the dynamic.
He was the anchor. He was studying electronics, which was incredibly useful. He famously built an amplifier, the DC amp, that Brian May used for many of his layered orchestral guitar sounds.
But his temperament was the key, wasn't it?
It was. You had these 3 very large, very strong, sometimes clashing personalities in Mercury, May, and Taylor. Deacon was quiet, reserved, steady. He was the counterbalance that kept the whole thing from spinning out of control.
So by early 1971, the lineup is finally complete. They have the name, the logo, the 4 members. But now they face the classic struggle.
A grand vision, a unique sound, but no record contract and no money.
Which leads them to the deal with Trident Studios. This is a really interesting insight into how the industry worked back then.
It is. They didn't get a straightforward record deal. They signed with Neptune Productions, which was a subsidiary of Trident, a very high-tech, prestigious studio in London.
Where all the big names were recording.
Exactly. But the deal meant Queen was at the bottom of their priority list. They were allowed to use the studio, but only during the downtime, the off-peak hours.
Which, as we said, was the middle of the night.
3 or 4 in the morning, after artists like David Bowie or Elton John had finished their sessions and gone home, they were using the scraps of time left over.
But it gave them access to state-of-the-art equipment.
It did. It allowed a debut band to produce a very high-fidelity, professional-sounding record. Their self-titled album, which came out in 1973, sounds fantastic from a technical standpoint.
And the reviews were okay, but it didn't exactly set the charts on fire.
No, the commercial success was low. Rolling Stone called it superb, so critics saw the potential. But the public didn't really catch on yet.
So they just went straight back to work. On to the second album, Queen II, in 1974. And this is where that signature Queen sound really starts to emerge.
It really does. Queen II is a much more dense, complex album. It's a mix of heavy metal and progressive rock. You have these elaborate fantasy lyrics, very complex arrangements.
And the layers. The famous layered sound.
This is where they really pushed that idea, stacking multiple vocal harmonies, multiple guitar parts to create this huge, almost orchestral wall of sound.
Which was polarizing at the time.
Very. For every fan who loved the ambition, there was a critic who found it excessive. The Winnipeg Free Press had that famous review calling it an overproduced monstrosity.
They were already being seen as a bit
And
much.
a bit too theatrical, too grand for the rock press of the day.
And the look of the band was also solidifying. The album cover for Queen II is iconic.
It is. The photo by Mick Rock, the four faces in a diamond formation against a black background.
Inspired by a photo of Marlene Dietrich.
From the movie Shanghai Express. It's a very deliberate, glamorous, androgynous look. It set them apart from the sort of jeans and t-shirt rock bands that were dominant at the time, and that image would become very important later on.
So 2 albums in, they have a sound, they have an image, but they still don't have a real hit. That all changes later in 1974.
With the third album, Sheer Heart Attack. This is the moment they learned how to distill their grand ideas into a 3-minute pop single.
But the recording itself was difficult. Brian May got very sick during their first U.S. tour.
He contracted hepatitis. It was very serious. He was hospitalized, and the band had to start recording the album without him. He came in later and overdubbed his guitar and vocal parts.
And despite all that, this album produced their first proper international hit single.
Killer Queen. And that song is a perfect distillation of Freddie Mercury's songwriting genius.
It's about a high-class prostitute.
It is, but the lyrics are so witty and sophisticated. Musically, it was a complete departure from the heavy rock of the first 2 albums.
It's got that vaudeville British music hall feel to it.
Exactly. It's theatrical, it swings, it's light on its feet. But then you have this incredibly complex, layered guitar solo from May. It was the perfect fusion of their pop sensibilities and their rock instincts.
And it worked. Number 2 in the UK, their first top 20 hit in the US. They'd finally arrived.
On the charts, yes. But in their bank accounts, it was a very different story.
Right. This is a classic music industry tale. By 1975, Queen is a famous, successful band, but they are completely broke.
The Trident deal was the problem. It was an all-encompassing production and management deal. They were on a fixed wage, and it was barely a living wage.
I read that John Deacon was denied an advance to put a deposit on a house.
That's the story, yes. They were generating all this revenue, but none of it was flowing back to them. They were trapped.
So they had to make a change.
A drastic one. They began the process of extricating themselves from Trident, which was a messy legal battle, and they hired a new manager.
John Reed, who at the time was managing Elton John.
One of the most powerful managers in the business. And his advice to them was apparently very simple.
You make the best record you can possibly make, and I'll take care of the business side.
And they took him at his word. They went into the studio to make what would become A Night at the Opera.
And they spared no expense. It was, at the time, the most expensive rock album ever produced.
They used multiple studios, endless hours of recording time. They were determined to make a masterpiece, a definitive statement.
And the centerpiece of that statement is one of the most famous songs ever recorded.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
So let's break this down, because the creation of this song is just incredible. It was all in Freddie's head from the beginning.
Almost entirely. He had the whole structure mapped out, reportedly on scraps of paper and in his mind. He would guide the band through the different sections. The ballad, the guitar solo, the opera, the hard rock finale.
The opera section is the technical marvel here, especially with 1975 technology.
It's difficult to overstate how complex it was. They were working with 24-track analog tape. To create that massive choral sound, they layered their own voices. Freddie, Brian, and Roger, over and over again.
How many overdubs in total?
The estimates are around 180 separate vocal overdubs. To do that, they had to keep bouncing tracks, mixing multiple vocal parts down to a single track to free up space for more recording.
And that physically wears out the tape.
It does. They pushed it so far that the magnetic oxide on the tape started to wear off. The tape literally became transparent in places. They were on the verge of destroying the master recording itself.
And after all that work, they present this nearly 6-minute epic to their record label, EMI, and the reaction is not positive.
The reaction is panic. The unwritten rule of radio was that a single had to be around 3 minutes long. EMI flatly refused to release it as the lead single.
So the band had to get creative.
Freddie had a plan. He gave a copy of the song to his friend, the DJ Kenny Everett, who was on Capital Radio in London.
But he told him not to play it.
A classic piece of reverse psychology. He said, here's the new single, but you can't play it on the radio. Of course, he knew exactly what Everett would do.
He played it a lot.
He played it 14 times in one weekend. The station's switchboards just lit up. Listeners were calling in, desperate to know what this incredible song was and when they could buy it.
Which forced the label's hand.
Completely. Public demand was so overwhelming that EMI had to release the full, uncut version. It went to #1 in the UK and stayed there for 9 weeks.
And it didn't just change the rules for song length. It changed the game for music marketing because of the video.
That's right. The video was created almost out of necessity. They were scheduled to appear on the big UK music show, Top of the Pops.
But they realized trying to mime that complex operatic section live on television would look silly.
It would look absurd. So as a solution, they decided to shoot a promotional film they could send to the show instead. They hired a director, Bruce Gowers, and shot the whole thing in about 3 hours.
For a budget of what, around £3,000 or £4,000?
About £3,500, yes. And it was a sensation. It effectively created the template for the modern music video as an essential marketing tool for a single.
And the album itself, A Night at the Opera, wasn't just a one-song wonder. It also showed the depth of the band's songwriting.
Absolutely. The second single from that album was You're My Best Friend.
A huge worldwide hit.
Mm-hmm.
And written by John Deacon.
Written by the quiet bassist. It just proved, again, that this was a four-pronged creative force. Any one of them could deliver a massive hit.
So after that, they're global superstars. As we move into the late 1970s, their sound starts to change again. They move into what people call stadium rock.
Or anthem rock. And this wasn't an accident. It was a very conscious decision, born from their live shows.
What do you mean?
Well, in 1977, they released the album News of the World. By this point, they were playing huge arenas, and Brian May in particular noticed something about the crowds.
You weren't just passively listening anymore.
No, they were participating. They were singing along to every word, chanting, stamping their feet. The audience had become part of the performance.
So he decided to write songs for them to perform.
Exactly. He came in with the idea for We Will Rock You, and Freddie came in with We Are the Champions. Both songs were written specifically to be sung by tens of thousands of people.
And We Will Rock You is an acoustic marvel. There's no drum kit on the studio recording.
None at all. The famous stomp, stomp, clap rhythm was created by the band members stomping on wooden boards in the studio and clapping their hands. They then layered that recording over and over with slight delays to create the sound of a massive crowd.
They engineered the sound of a stadium before the song was ever played in one.
Which is brilliant. They gave the audience their part to play.
And by the early 1980s, they were taking that stadium show to places other bands wouldn't go. We have to talk about the South American tour of 1981.
That tour was a massive logistical and cultural undertaking. At the time, much of South America was under military dictatorships, and it just wasn't a standard stop on the global rock circuit.
It was seen as too difficult, too dangerous.
And Queen went in and played some of the biggest shows in history. In Buenos Aires, they played to a total of 300,000 people over a series of nights.
And the single biggest show was in São Paulo, Brazil.
Yes, 131,000 paying fans in a single concert. At the time, it was the world record for the largest paying audience for a single band.
The cultural impact of that must have been immense. You see clips of over 100,000 Argentinians singing Love of My Life, Back to Freddie, word for word.
In perfect English. It is a powerful moment. It showed their music had transcended language and borders. They met Diego Maradona backstage. It cemented them as a truly global phenomenon, not just a British or American one.
Around the same time, in 1980, their recorded sound took another sharp turn with the album The Game.
It did. For years, every Queen album sleeve had the same declaration on it.
No synthesizers.
It was a point of pride for them, a commitment to creating their complex sounds organically with guitars and voices. With The Game, that changed.
They finally embraced the synthesizer.
And it led to a more stripped-back modern sound. But the biggest hit from that album came from an unexpected place.
From John Deacon again, another one, Bites the Dust.
A pure funk track. It sounded nothing like anything they'd done before. Apparently, the band wasn't even sure it should be a single.
And the legend is that Michael Jackson convinced them.
He was a fan, and he visited them backstage after a show in Los Angeles. He heard the track and told them they'd be crazy not to release it.
They took his advice, and it became their biggest selling single ever in the United States.
By a huge margin. It was #1 on the pop charts, the rock charts, and the R&B charts simultaneously. A massive crossover hit.
And on that same album, you have a completely different kind of song, Crazy Little Thing Called Love.
Which is a perfect rockabilly tribute to Elvis Presley.
Written by Freddie in a bathtub.
That's the story. He was in a hotel in Munich, and the idea came to him. He couldn't play guitar very well, so he composed it using just a few simple chords, which is what gives it that authentic, raw 1950s feel.
So the early 80s, they're at the peak of their powers. But the decade wasn't all a smooth ride. After the success of the game, they hit a major roadblock,
The 1982 album Hot Space.
which is probably the most controversial record in their catalog.
It is. They leaned very heavily into the disco and funk sounds that had made Another One Bites the Dust a hit. The album was recorded in Munich during a period of a lot of partying and internal tension.
Brian May and Roger Taylor, the rock contingent of the band, were not happy with the direction.
They felt the guitars and the rock element were being completely sidelined in favor of drum machines and synthesizers. There was also a time when Freddie's personal manager, Paul Prenter, was becoming a very divisive influence, isolating Freddie from the other members.
And the album was a commercial failure, particularly in America.
It stopped their momentum in the U.S. dead in its tracks. And there were other factors contributing to their decline there.
The video for I Want to Break Free.
A classic case of a cultural reference getting lost in translation. The video shows the band members in drag.
As a parody of the long-running British soap opera Coronation Street.
In the UK, everyone understood the joke. It was seen as funny and affectionate.
But in America, MTV did not get the joke.
Not at all. It was seen as strange and, in some more conservative quarters, deeply offensive. MTV banned the video, and it seriously damaged their image in the States.
They also made a major political error around this time, in 1984.
The Sun City controversy. This was a serious misjudgment. They played a series of concerts at the Sun City Resort in South Africa.
During the height of the apartheid regime?
Yes. There was a widespread United Nations cultural boycott in place, which they chose to break.
What was their justification?
They argued that they were a non-political band and that they were playing to integrated audiences. But the backlash from the anti-apartheid movement and the music press was immense.
They were fined by the British Musicians Union and put on a UN blacklist.
It was a significant stain on their reputation. Roger Taylor has since said that, in retrospect, it was a mistake.
So by the middle of 1985, the band is in a very strange position, still huge in most of the world, but damaged in the U.S. and dealing with this political fallout. And then comes an opportunity for redemption.
Live Aid, July 13th, 1985, at Wembley Stadium.
And their performance that day is now considered one of the greatest live performances in rock history.
It was a total masterclass. They had just over 20 minutes on stage. Other bands were a bit shambolic, under-rehearsed. Queen had meticulously planned a set that was just a condensed burst of their greatest hits.
And Freddie Mercury just commanded that entire stadium.
He had 72,000 people in the palm of his hand. The famous I.O. call and response moment is pure magic. He just holds them.
The consensus from everyone there, from Bob Geldof to the other musicians, was that Queen just completely stole the show.
A 2005 poll of music industry figures voted it the single greatest rock performance of all time. It completely revitalized their career in a single afternoon.
And they rode that momentum into 1986 with a new album, A Kind of Magic, and a massive European tour.
The Magic Tour. It culminated in a legendary show at Nebworth Park.
In front of an audience of over 120,000 people, it was a massive triumph. But it was also the end of an era, though no one knew it at the time.
That show, on August 9th, 1986, was the last time the four original members of Queen would ever perform on a stage together.
That was the last concert with Freddie Mercury.
It was. He made a comment to the crowd, something like, "I'm not going to be doing this forever," which seemed like typical stage banter. In hindsight, it was chillingly prophetic.
Because just a year later, in 1987, Freddie received a devastating diagnosis.
He was diagnosed as HIV positive.
And he made the decision to keep that information almost entirely private.
Intensely private. The band closed ranks around him. The British tabloid press was ruthless, constantly running stories speculating about his health as his appearance changed. But they said nothing publicly.
And they retreated from the road and focused entirely on recording.
Yes, the last years were spent in the studio. They released the album The Miracle in 1989. And they made a significant change to their creative process for that record.
The songwriting credits.
For the first time, instead of each member getting an individual credit for the songs they wrote, every track was simply credited to Queen.
To avoid the internal arguments over who wrote what and who got the royalties.
It was a gesture of unity, a way to eliminate the ego and competition and just work together as a single entity in those final years.
And the final album released in his lifetime was Innuendo in 1991. And by this point, Freddie's health was failing dramatically.
He was in constant pain, often so weak he could barely walk. But his voice, his will to create, remained incredibly strong.
There's a famous story about the recording of the song The Show Must Go On.
It's a testament to his spirit. Brian May wrote the song, And the vocal melody is incredibly powerful and demanding, with some very high sustained notes. May was worried that Freddie might not physically be able to sing it.
He brought his concerns to Freddie.
He did, and Freddie's response was just definitive. He reportedly took a measure of vodka, looked at Brian and said something along the lines of, "I'll absolutely do it, darling," then walked into the vocal booth and delivered one of the most powerful performances of his career, supposedly in a single take.
He gave it everything he had left.
All the way to the very end.
Freddie Mercury passed away on November 24th, 1991. The day before, he had finally released a public statement confirming that he had AIDS.
The official cause of death was bronchial pneumonia, which was a complication from the illness. It was a profound loss, and the end of the band as it had been known.
But it wasn't the end of the music or the institution of Queen. In the immediate aftermath, there was a huge tribute concert.
The Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley in 1992. It was a massive event, with everyone from Metallica and Guns N' Roses to Elton John and David Bowie performing their songs. It showed the incredible breadth of their influence across the music world.
And the 3 surviving members had one last piece of work to do with Freddie's voice.
The Made in Heaven album, released in 1995. This was a remarkable piece of musical archaeology.
They took the final vocal tracks that Freddie had managed to record in his last month, some when he was barely able to stand, and they painstakingly built new musical arrangements around them.
It was their way of finishing the story. A final act of closure.
And for John Deacon, it truly was the final act.
It was. He performed with May and Taylor one last time in 1997 on a track called No One But You, Only the Good Die Young, and then he retired from the music business.
Completely from public life.
Yes. He remains a director and a silent partner in the Queen business entity, but he does not perform or participate in any of the new projects. He felt that without Freddie, it wasn't really Queen anymore.
But Brian May and Roger Taylor felt differently. They wanted to keep the music alive on stage.
Which led to the first major collaboration in the post-Mercury era, from 2004 to 2009.
With Paul Rodgers.
From the bands Free and Bad Company. A fantastic singer, but a very different kind of singer.
He's a blues rock vocalist. He wasn't trying to be Freddie.
And that was the point. It was billed as Queen plus Paul Rodgers, a collaboration. They even recorded a new studio album, The Cosmos Rocks. It was successful, but the chemistry was, perhaps, not quite right for the Queen catalog.
It lacked that specific theatricality.
It did. Which brings us to the current and longest-running collaboration.
With Adam Lambert.
A connection that started, of all places, on the TV show American Idol in 2009.
Lambert was a contestant, and May and Taylor performed with him on the finale.
And the chemistry was obvious. Lambert has the vocal range, the power, and crucially, the showmanship and flamboyance that the music requires.
He's not a Freddie imitator, but he can inhabit that same space.
That's how May and Taylor describe it. They've been touring as Queen plus Adam Lambert to huge success since about 2011.
And in 2018, the entire brand got a massive boost from a different medium, the biopic.
The film, Bohemian Rhapsody, whatever one thinks of its historical accuracy, its impact was undeniable.
A colossal financial success, rose to over $900 million worldwide.
The highest-grossing musical biopic of all time. Rami Malek won the Academy Award for his portrayal of Freddie. But for the band's legacy, the most important thing it did was introduce their music to a whole new generation of young fans.
The song Bohemian Rhapsody was back in the top 40, decades after its release.
It completely refreshed their audience and solidified their multi-generational appeal.
Which brings us right up to the very recent past. The activity has been constant.
It has. In 2020, they put out their first album with Lambert, a live album called Live Around the World. In 2022, they unearthed and released a lost track from the Miracle Sessions, Face It Alone.
They performed at the Queen's Platinum Jubilee that same year.
With Paddington Bear, no less. It just shows how they've become part of the British establishment.
And of course, the billion-pound catalog sale in 2024 and the Polar Music Prize in 2025. It's an entity that is still very much active and growing.
It is. The music is now being curated and managed for perpetuity.
So before we conclude, let's just try to define what makes up that Queen sound. Musically, what is it?
The first word that comes to mind is fluidity. Genre fluidity. This is a band that refused to stay in one lane.
They did everything.
Progressive rock, heavy metal, pop, disco, rockabilly, opera, often within the same song. But there were a few constants.
Brian May's guitar.
The tone of the Red Special is one of the most recognizable sounds in rock. And the way he plays it, often using an old sixpence coin as a pick, gives it a very particular sharp attack.
And the vocals. The
The
harmonies?
vocal blend is the other key ingredient.
Hmm.
You had Freddie's powerful mid-range, Brian's lower register, and Roger Taylor's incredibly high, almost falsetto rasp. When they combined those three voices, they created that unique choral sound.
And their influence, as we've touched on, is just everywhere.
It's incredibly diverse. You have a thrash metal band like Metallica covering Stone Cold Crazy. You have an alternative icon like Tom York from Radiohead building a homemade guitar because of Brian May.
Lady Gaga famously took her name from Radio Gaga.
Exactly. You see their theatricality in artists from Katy Perry to K-pop superstars like BTS. Yeah. The idea of the big audience participation stadium show owes so much to them.
It's just a remarkable journey, from 4 college students in a van to a billion-pound global enterprise.
And it comes back to that core idea we started with, the democracy. It was a partnership of 4 equals, all of whom contributed at the highest level.
It's worth saying it one more time. Every single member wrote a #1 hit song.
Mercury with Bohemian Rhapsody, May with We Will Rock You, Taylor with Radio Gaga, and Deacon with Another One Bites the Dust. That balance of creative power is almost unique in the history of rock music.
And it leaves us with a final thought. With the catalog now sold to a major corporation and the surviving active members well into their late 70s, the brand of Queen has, it seems, successfully completed its transition.
It's moved from being a working band into something more akin to a classical composer's estate.
The music is now an asset, a body of work that will be performed and licensed and played for centuries, regardless of who, if anyone, is standing on the stage.
The music has achieved a kind of corporate immortality.
Thanks for listening.